The sequel to The Passion of the Christ is set to start filming in 2025. Mel Gibson was recently in Malta, scouting locations for The Passion of the Christ Resurrection. It's hard to fully appreciate, 20 years later, just how huge Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ was in 2004. It hit theaters in February and stayed for over 2 months, with multiple recuts and re-releases. The film earned over $600 million, becoming the highest-grossing R-rated movie ever at the time. It only lost that title this past summer when Deadpool and Wolverine proved they could be bigger than Jesus. Now, though, it looks like it might be making a return and could even reclaim that spot. According to Consequence, citing a report from Ital Press, Gibson is currently in Malta, talking with local authorities about using the island as a filming location for Resurrection. The plan is to start filming in 2025. Both Gibson and star Jim Caviezel, who is set to return for the sequel, have been vocal about their plans for The Passion of the Christ 2. Gibson first announced the project in 2016, and Caviezel made it clear in 2018 that he believed the film would be the biggest film in history. The first movie was one of his most high-profile roles, and since then, he's appeared in a variety of films and TV shows, including Outlander, The Prisoner, and Person of Interest. He also returned to the biblical epic genre for Paul, Apostle of Christ, where he played the Apostle Luke alongside James Faulkner's Paul. A surprising number of cast members from the 20-year film are returning to continue the epic story, joining Caviezel as Jesus. Maia Morgenstern is reportedly returning to reprise her crucial role as Mary, Jesus' mother. Francesco DeVito will once again portray Peter, one of Jesus' most well-known apostles. Lastly, Christo Gikov is rumored to be coming back as John, though he hasn't officially signed on yet since he passed away. In 2022, Gibson gave a sneak peek at the plot for the sequel, suggesting that his script is less grounded than the first film, which was a straightforward, albeit brutally violent, depiction of Christ's story. He mentioned that the sequel will have a more sci-fi feel, with parts of the story taking place in the past and in other realms. Gibson is currently between projects. His latest film, Flight Risk, starring Mark Wahlberg, Michelle Dockery, and Topher Grace, was recently pushed from October 2024 to January 2025. After a series of high-profile scandals in the late 2000s and early 2010s, Gibson has gradually made a comeback, especially with his Oscar-nominated 2016 war film, Hacksaw Ridge. However, when making the sequel, it's important for the production to navigate his controversies carefully. The film sparked questions about historical and biblical accuracy. While some critics argue that Gibson took liberties with the historical accounts of first-century Judea and Christ's crucifixion, others defend the film by pointing out that its primary focus wasn't on strict historical accuracy. Biblical scholar Mark Goodacre noted that he couldn't find any instances where Gibson claimed the film to be historically accurate. Gibson himself has said, "I think that my first duty is to be as faithful as possible in telling the story so that it doesn't contradict the scriptures. Now, so long as it didn't do that, I felt that I had a pretty wide berth for artistic interpretation and to fill in some of the spaces with logic, with imagination, with various other readings." For instance, the film features a scene where Judas Iscariot is shown being tormented by demons in the form of children. Another scene shows Satan carrying a demonic baby during Christ's flogging, which can be interpreted as a twisted take on traditional depictions of the Madonna and Child, symbolizing Satan and the Antichrist. Gibson described the scene with the demonic baby as evil distorting what's good. He explained that there's nothing more tender and beautiful than a mother and child, so the devil takes that and distorts it. Instead of a typical mother and child, you have an androgynous figure holding a 40-year-old baby with hair on his back. He acknowledged that it was weird and shocking, much like the moment when Jesus is turned over to be scourged on his chest, which is when this devilish appearance occurs. When asked about the film's faithfulness to the New Testament, Father Augustine Di Noia from the Vatican's Doctrinal Congregation clarified, "Mel Gibson's film is not a documentary, but remains faithful to the fundamental structure common to all 4 accounts of the Gospels," adding, "Mel Gibson's film is entirely faithful to the New Testament." Beside this, the film also faced criticism for its excessive violence. A.O. Scott of the New York Times argued that The Passion of the Christ was so focused on the brutality of Jesus' final hours that it seemed to come from wrath rather than love, and it left viewers more assaulted than uplifted. David Edelstein, film critic for Slate, called the film a 2-hour and 6-minute snuff movie, The Jesus Chainsaw Massacre, and criticized Gibson for emphasizing the violence of Jesus' execution over his religious teachings. In 2008, writer Michael Gurno for American Atheists echoed similar concerns, calling the film a mainstream snuff film. Critic Armand White, writing for Africana.com, offered a different take on the violence, suggesting that Gibson was aware that violence sells in Hollywood. White noted that while Gibson typically glorifies vengeance in his films, this time he asked for a more sensitive and serious response to violence, which made the film's portrayal of brutality problematic. During Diane Sawyer's interview, Gibson said, "I wanted it to be shocking and I wanted it to be extreme, so that they see the enormity of that sacrifice, to see that someone could endure that and still come back with love and forgiveness, even through extreme pain and suffering and ridicule. The actual crucifixion was more violent than what was shown on the film, but I thought no one would get anything out of it." Now, not to mention the allegations of anti-Semitism. Before the film was released, there were significant criticisms regarding perceived anti-Semitic content. These concerns played a role in 20th Century Fox's decision to pass on distributing the film. The company informed New York Assemblyman Dov Hikind that a protest outside the News Corporation building had influenced their decision. Hikind warned other companies that distributing the film would be harmful to Jews worldwide, stating, "This is unhealthy for Jews all over the world." A joint committee from the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops' Secretariat for Ecumenical and Interreligious Affairs and the Anti-Defamation League reviewed a version of the script before the film's release. They issued a statement calling it one of the most troublesome texts relative to anti-Semitic potential that any of us had seen in 25 years. One scene in The Passion of the Christ that was seen as potentially anti-Semitic involved the dialogue of Caiaphas, who says, "His blood is on us and our children." This quote has historically been interpreted by some as a curse placed upon the Jewish people. Certain Jewish groups asked for this line to be removed from the film, but only the subtitles were altered. The original dialogue remained in the Hebrew soundtrack. When asked about this scene, Gibson explained that he wanted to keep it in, sharing that his brother had urged him not to remove it. He acknowledged the controversy it could cause, stating, "If I included that in there, they'd be coming after me at my house. They'd come to kill me." In another interview, he further clarified that while he believed the line was true, he didn't think it referred specifically to Jews or implicated them in any curse. Instead, Gibson felt the passage was meant for all people present and future, saying, "His blood is on us, and that's what Jesus wanted." He added that one reason for keeping the line was his desire not to let others dictate what could or couldn't be said in the film. Well, that's it. What do you think about the upcoming The Passion of the Christ Resurrection? Are you excited to see how Mel Gibson continues this story, or do you have concerns about its portrayal of historical events? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more updates on this and other upcoming films. We'll see you next time.